Hello, everybody. Welcome to Squared Circle Calendar. On this episode, we're going to be taking a look back at some of the happenings in professional wrestling in June of 1975. So, without no further ado, let's get started. Okay, so for one of the first big pieces of news that happened in June of 1970 was on June 14th, 1975, in St. Petersburg, Florida, at a championship wrestling for Championship Wrestling for Florida show. Um, Hiro Matsuda would defeat Ken Mantell to win the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship. Matsuda, of course, this would be Matsuda's second reign as World Junior Heavyweight title holder. Of course, he would spend the rest of the month defending the title throughout Florida, throughout the Gulf Coast in Florida, as well as into the tri-state area, um, in throughout Arkansas, um, Louisiana, Oklahoma, um, and also in the southeast. Go up to Tennessee as well, defended there against Danny Hodge. It would reignite their feud over the title as well. So that was one of the more major happenings. Um, Fabulous Moolah would start a bit of a feud with Susan Green, and would spend much of the remainder of the year battling Susan Green. Defending the NWA World Women's title throughout the rest of the year. Of course, they started, Moolah would defend the title at Madison Square Garden on June the 16th, and they would be wrestling throughout the NWA territories with Moolah, defending against Susan Green. This coming, of course, 5.5 months after Susan Green had been, bloodied by Chio Obata at a IWE show. And of course, Jack Briscoe would be defending the NWA World Title throughout the Southeast and into Texas as well, defending the title against the likes of Johnny Valentine, um, Al Madrill. Let's see, Harley Race. I think had a Harley Race, Dick the Bruiser. Some grueling matches with some of the toughest guys of the era. Um, with that being said, let's go on to some other stuff. So as we head over to Japan, IWE, the International Wrestling Enterprises, was holding its um, big challenge series throughout the throughout throughout June. You know, Now Russia Kimura had won the IWA World Heavyweight Title IWE version um, on April the 19th, defeating Mad Dog Vachon for the IWA World Title. Because of the fact he was also the one half of the reigning IWA World Tag Team Championships with Great Kusatsu, they had to vacate the title at the end of the month. Well, on June the 13th, um, during the Big Challenge Series, Great Kusatsu, with his new partner Mighty Inoue, had defeated Tor Kamada and Duke Savage in the finals of the tournament to crown new champions. Um, let's see. Also happening in Japan was the Golden Fight series going on in New Japan under Antonio Inoki. Some of the notable gaijin who participated, foreigners who participated in that series included Andre the Giant at the very beginning of the tournament, Greg Valentine, very early on in his career, still establishing himself. Um, those, I think, were the two main um, notables who were there. At the end, of course, at the end of the Golden Fight series, the last day of the tour. Now, Tiger Jeet Singh had also come back towards the end of the tour and started wrestling on the scene, and he would defend the NWF World Heavyweight Championship against Antonio Inoki, in which Inoki would defeat him on June the 26th for that title. So, so basically, Tiger Jeet Singh would come back to defend the NWF World Heavyweight Championship against Antonio Inoki, in which Inoki would defeat him for that championship. As we move all the way across to North America, we head to Canada first in the Maritimes provinces, as the Eastern Sports Association had started its wrestling season again in May. One of the big rivalries going on there was between Leo Burke and Bob Brown. Bob Brown on June the 24th would defeat Leo Burke for the Tape Fist title. The Tape Fist, I believe, was much like the Brass Knuckles title. It's kind of one of those precursors to the whole idea of hardcore wrestling. You'd go into the match with Tape Fist and could use those Tape Fist in any way you saw fit, obviously. Um, but that was a big rivalry there. Um, they would battle over both the Tape Fist title and the Maritimes version of the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship. As we now head to the northeast portion of the United States, on June the 4th, Blackjack Lanza and Blackjack Mulligan, of course, the father of Barry Windham, and the grandfather of Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas. Um, the Blackjacks would make their WWF debut at the June 4th TV tapings in Philadelphia of All Star Wrestling, facing off against the WWF Tag Team Champions Dominique DeNucci and Victor Rivera in a non-title match. Two interesting notes about this particular event. One, this at this point, um, during the match, the Blackjacks signed with Captain Lou Albano, taking him on as their manager. And this was also the very infamous match that led to the near riot in Philadelphia, when the wrestlers just started brawling with each other and were really going at it. It got to the point where fans started throwing things in the ring. While there's no footage of the riot itself or the near riot itself, there is the matches you can find on YouTube. Um, yeah. So also on the 16th, of course, on June the 16th, at the Madison Square Garden show, I mentioned earlier, of course, Fabulous Moolah defending the NWA World Women's Championship against Susan Green. Also on that show, Bruno Sammartino would defend the WWF Heavyweight Championship against Waldo Von Erich, continuing his feud with Fred Blassie's stable of right, during like May, June, and July, he would be battling Waldo Von Erich, while before May and after July, he'd be feuding with the Golden Greek Spiros Arion, but he beat Waldo von Erich, and this led to some very heated issues there, where he just kept stomping on von Erich after the match. So that was all going down in the WWF at the time, the Northeast portion. So you head down to Mid Atlantic. You had on one side you had Johnny Valentine, Ric Flair, and the Andersons feuding with with Sonny King, Rufus Jones, Paul Jones, and Wahoo McDaniel. Paul Jones and Wahoo McDaniel dropped the Mid Atlantic version of the World Tag Team Championships to the Andersons on June the 11th in Raleigh, and then towards the end of the month on the 29th in Asheville, Wahoo McDaniel would beat Johnny Valentine for the Mid Atlantic Championship. We headed out into Georgia. Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater would come up from Florida to start to wrestle in Georgia. Slater beating Bob Armstrong on the 19th for the Macon Heavyweight Championship, and then towards the Macon Heavyweight Championship, and then towards the end of the month on the 27th at the Omni, Orton Jr. and Slater beating Bob Armstrong and Robert Fuller for the Georgia Tag Team Championships. Abdullah the Butcher would also defeat Bob Armstrong for the Columbus Heavyweight Championship earlier in the month as well. So, and as we move down to Florida, of course, the big news is that towards the end of the month, after a quick stop in Boston to face Butcher Vachon at the WWF show at the Boston Garden, Andre the Giant, after starting off in Japan for New Japan, participating in the Golden Fight Series, would finish off the month in Florida, facing off against the likes of Harley Race and Bob Roop and Roger Kirby. He would face Race 3 times, 2 times in a singles match, and then once in a tag team match in which he would team with Rocky Johnson, the Rock's dad, against Race and Roop. Of course, this is still at a time when, of course, Harley Race was still kind of working his way up towards main event status as well, among other things. So, and as we move on to the Gulf Coast area, Ken Lucas is basically in a bit of a rivalry with Dr. X over the Gulf Coast Heavyweight Championship. The two were engaging around this time in boxing matches. Let's see. Ken Lucas was still a fairly dominant figure in the Gulf Coast area, at the time, holding the Pensacola Heavyweight, Panama City Heavyweight, and Mobile Heavyweight, 3 city heavyweight titles to his credit there. Mongolian Samba would defeat Ron Fuller for the Tennessee version of the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship on June the 9th of 75 in Memphis. The two would continue their feud throughout Tennessee for at least the rest of the month there. Wrestling, wrestling back and forth for the title in both Mid-America and Southeastern Championship Wrestling. Mongolian Samba would also defend the Tennessee version of Southern Heavyweight Championship against Ron Wright on the card in Southeast Championship Wrestling. We head up to Detroit. Bobo Brazil and Hank James would make their return to the Detroit area after being gone during the previous month, touring in Japan for All Japan's Black Power series, in which they had actually challenged Baba and Saruta to a losing effort for the NWA International Tag Team Championships. Upon his return, Bobo Brazil would reignite his feud with the Sheik over the Detroit version of the United States Heavyweight Championship. I think James would start to team up with Mighty Igor, and they would eventually defeat the Poffos for the Detroit version of the World Tag Team Championships. As we move on, the Central States area, the Oates brothers, Jerry and Ted Oates, were the reigning Central States version of the World Tag Team Champions and were fending off challenges. Also, very early on in his career, Jesse Ventura was actually wrestling for Central States around this time in spring and summer of '75. I believe he would eventually go on to the Pacific Northwest area later in the year, but he was wrestling in the Central States region in 1975 in the spring and summer of that time. And then, of course, another guy who would go on to the Pacific Northwest and AWA later, Ed Wiskowski, under the name of, well, he would, in the AWA, he would go under the name Colonel De Beers, the apartheid soldier. So they were there in Central States. Jack Briscoe would defend the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in St. Louis on June the 20th against Dick the Bruiser, in which he would retain the title. Then we go down the tri-state area. I mentioned, Hiro Matsuda had won the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title and was taking some time to defend the title down there among the other territories. We also saw a reignition of the feud between Dick Murdoch and Bill Watts. At this time, of course, Murdoch was the reigning tri-state version of the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship champion, and Bill Watts brought the title back that he took to the Georgia and Florida territory, and this would prove to be a major story a little later in the year. But these two were going after each other at this point in time. Well, then we go up to Minnesota and we look at the AWA, in which during the month, of course, Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens had been fending off the challenge of Dusty Rhodes and the Crusher, who were trying to, on the 14th, the Crusher and Dusty Rhodes had beaten the Bockwinkel and Stevens for the title, but the titles were returned to Bockwinkel and Stevens because Crusher was a replacement for superstar Billy Graham, who was unable to make the show for some reason. The contract it had to be Graham and Rhodes, so yeah. And Ray Stevens at this time too was going back and forth between AWA and West Texas, as he was also competing in NWA Western States for the Funk Brothers. He was the reigning Brass Knuckles champion at the time. Terry Funk, after having won the NWA Florida Championship on June the 2nd, would lose it back to Roop on the 16th and then head back to West Texas and beat Ciclo Negro for the Amarillo version of the NWA International Heavyweight Championship. So that's about it for all that. That's a lot of the major stuff that was going on in the world of professional wrestling in June of 1975. I hope you guys are enjoying this and learning about some of the stuff going on in pro wrestling in the past and walking through the history with me as we work our way towards present day. If you guys want to contact me directly, you can check the links below. My Discord's down there. If you guys like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I always look forward to the conversations with you guys, and hopefully we can have some good conversations about pro wrestling too. So until next time, bye.